Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we're bringing you day 210 of Russian war in Ukraine. The day when Putin's regime announced mobilization. It is a rather total mobilization, rather from what you hear in the media about it being partial. The current joke goes that partial refers to the limb that you lose, if you're lucky, before coming home. Right now, they are rounding up people in smaller towns, smaller villages, while the bigger ones are protesting. Putin is raising the stakes, hoping to scare the Western allies of Ukraine. So it's now up to us and our governments to continue supporting this country and their people in their fight for life and liberty. And I will bring you Mark Feygin, Russian opposition journalist, and Olexiy Arestovych, Lieutenant Colonel, advisor to the Office of the President of Ukraine. Enjoy. Dear friends, I'm glad to see you all on Feigin Live. We're doing another stream, day 210, with Olexiy Arestovich. Hello, Alexei. Good evening. Good evening to your house. It is Wednesday, September 21st, 1 minute past 10 in Kiev, and we have over 150,000 watching us live. 21,000 of you clicked the like button. It'll be a special stream today, so thank you for joining. And again, please post links to that stream in your social media, and subscribe to Alexei's channel, to Feigin Live, and to the Privateer Station. Let's start a bit different today. Let's not start with the map, but let's start with discussing why did he decide to support referendum, try to enforce that question in the occupied territories, and also to announce mobilization in Russia. What do you think pushed him to that action? Because if you were going, I think it is a spontaneous decision, because if it was planned, why would you stimulate Kadyrov with your national battalions? And why would you support and promote Prigozhin's statements about recruiting inmates? Regardless, also of the official war with Ukraine not being announced in the legal field. I'm not even going into the legalities of things happening in Russia. This is bullshit, a complete bullshit. So why do you need mobilization without announcement of martial law? So it looks either a little too early, or we do not understand something and the situation is indeed dire. I suspect that it may be a result of his negotiations with Xi Jinping and Modi, and results of that Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where Putin probably failed some goals that he wanted to achieve. So one of the explanations that perhaps they pushed back on him, and he wants to use escalation to maybe persuade Washington to put press on Ukraine into the peace talks. But I have a question. What could India and China and other countries tell him? Quickly win the war? No. Their push would be finish the war. Be done with it, end it. And his excuses were, we would have, but Ukraine doesn't want to discuss it with us. And it's almost the same words he used with China. And today, after his words, Minister of Foreign Affairs of China came out to the media and said it would be nice if Russia actually ceased fire and switched to negotiations. So, do you mean that he is protesting against China? What do you think he's doing? I think he is trying to put an end to the war. He's trying to, in his way, he wants to push the West to make Kiev sit down and discuss situation on the front with Russia and start negotiating, and also threaten everybody that he has unlimited reserve, unlimited human reserve that he can bring to the front. So basically, summing it up, he is creating a position for negotiations. This is Russian territory now, we're not discussing it, this is status quo, it's ours. We're not arguing about that. We not even arguing about Kharkov and Zaporozhye regions and Donetsk and Lugansk republics. Whatever we have will be ours. So, what do you think is related to the yesterday postponement of his speech? Because he was initially supposed to speak at 8 p.m. Moscow time, and then it was pedaled down to almost midnight, and then they cancelled. I think it's just geography. He was supposed to be talking earlier, and then they figured that Far East needs to wake up before he brings that up. You know what? I like your version. Oh, bring me yours and we'll discuss. Let's do that. But what if my point of view is very close to yours? Well, there is a nuance. We probably have some difference. Let's discuss what we see. Some people say that he was not going to announce mobilization, full mobilization, half mobilization. No, I'm not talking about the time shift of the announcement. I'm talking about Shanghai version. Yeah, I think Shanghai has something to do with it. He saw Chinese president for the first time after the Olympic Games, right? Since February or January. Also, right after Samarkand, Patrushev went and visited Beijing to probably continue negotiating some aspects, and now he is trying to wrangle it up. I think these mysterious plans already failed without even starting to come to life. Oh, that's the usual thing with them. They usually fail before they start. Our position is very straightforward. We will continue fighting regardless of your mobilization and bringing those people to the front. And Western position was already announced as well. International orgs gathered and said, hello, new sanctions. Hodges is making rather sharp statements. I don't know if he wants to become a congressman in the US, or maybe he was tasked with stating those positions. Yeah, I'm summing it up for our viewers, that, about the falling apart of Russia. And if Russia will use nukes, they'll destroy the whole Black Sea fleet. And there'll be other consequences. By the way, Putin did refer to him in his speech, and he kind of quoted parts of what Hodges was saying. By the way, for our people, for our viewers, you don't even realize that there are some hawks in Pentagon. People in Russia think that American generals today wear strings and half of them are transgender. This is far from truth. These guys are pretty rough. And some of them are just waiting for a chance to take on Putin's regime. It's, I want to mention another thing. Why you and me are trying here for 210 days, talking and discussing every point, and then Putin goes out and quotes Hodges in his speech, without telling everybody that he's quoting him. I think he's afraid. Oh well, funny. Well, yeah. Our Western allies were not scared by that. Zaluzhny also came out and made a statement. All right, whoever you bring to the front, we'll grind them down. In Ukraine, people are laughing. There is 1,001 new memes about the god-awful mobilization in Russia. And that's it. That's all my speech. By the way, yeah, even Biden mentioned today that they'll continue supporting Ukraine as long as we want and as long as it's necessary. And diplomatic community also said that referendums would be illegal, they would not be recognized, and these are the signs of weakness of the regime. I have another version, that Putin may be not an American spy, but a Chinese spy. How would you explain that? Who knows, Mark? One just needs to somehow sanely explain his actions, and I'm out of explanations. So you think he's destroying Russia in interests of China? That Russia would be like a ripe fruit falling into Chinese hands? Probably. Or he could be a very nice little calf sucking the tits of two cows, China and United States. Frankly, I cannot remember through the whole history of Russia such a low point in their history. Do you know why they announced 300,000? And it's not a partial mobilization, it's a full mobilization. It's just a marketing move. Not a single Russian citizen will be able to control how many will they mobilize. 300, 305, 360? Nobody. But that number is pretty straightforward. Their joint losses are about 150K, and they're calling about double that. And they already written off the next 150, and they have a double amount of that, and that they think should give them enough to get an upper hand in this fight. Note one thing, that they kind of did a combo interview. Shoigu also made a statement right after Putin, and he stated that they have 5,930 killed in this war in their military, and in Ukraine they lost 60,000. Oh yeah, you're saying that he's exactly, he's pretty accurate to our numbers. 61,000 dead, about 100 plus wounded. So he's kind of reversing the numbers, and that's why they're doing 150 twice. If one had half a brain, they would understand that if you only lost 6,000 out of 200,000 military group, why do you need to mobilize anyone? Because there are neo-Nazis in Ukraine, managed by NATO and Western allies, created long-term capabilities and opportunities to destroy Russia and proceed to attacking Russia when they destroy Russian troops in Ukraine. So Russia needs to mobilize. Do we look at the map today? Let's look at the map. Mark, there is no real reason. There is not much happening on the front. Okay, we're not bringing the map today. Is there anything we're bringing? Anything in the news that could have pushed him? Anything maybe from Kherson, any attack on Lugansk, anything there that could have pushed him with this announcement? Mark, I have a very poor quality. I don't know if that's my psychological training or something. It's akin to telepathy, kind of, because I do understand the question usually from the beginning, and I'm trying to answer it before you finish the question. I'm not being rude. I just apologize for trying to start answering too soon. Let's start with the military version. It may not be complete. It may be addition to the Chinese version. They probably, so that version says that they realized that potential of Ukraine versus their potential, and they said we may not survive the next Kharkov offensive if Ukraine decides to do that. And they decided to write a new chapter in the history of the world in military warfare. It is the first attempt in the world to try to stop military advancement by referendum. So I think they understood that if we concentrate our troops on any part of the front, we will punch through. And if so, we need to hope and stop them with the dire threat of using nukes and calling those territories Russian territories. And they realize that the next couple of weeks are critical, because after that there'll be a referendum. And I'm also thinking, are we missing any dates? 1st of October, anything else he could have tied to? Maybe 7th of October, that's his birthday. Yeah, maybe a week for mobilization, something for referendum, and the present for birthday. I don't know. And just in case if Ukrainians will not be afraid of nukes and will continue pushing, then here's the 300,000. And it's pretty serious. They actually are rounding people up in wherever they can, without much sorting. We'll address to that. We'll address these people who are still alive but potentially are dead. We'll talk about that separately. That indeed is happening towards the end of the program. It does matter. I think our appeal, our speech would matter. And we are at the level of acknowledgement by the Russian side that even if they won't listen to us now, their ancestors will refer to that statement later and say they should have listened to these guys. Because, yeah, those who don't want to end up dead should probably watch our streams. So all that is happening probably on the verge of the next push of Ukraine, right? On the front. So how this mobilization and all that will affect the support of the Western allies? Even in his statement, Putin said that Ukraine is even being given long-range weapons to maybe attack our territory. We need to fight back. So this action is kind of stupid because by calling these occupied territories Russian, you're essentially bringing the war right to the border or inside of Russia. And if you're pushing the line of front so close to your border, then Ukraine doesn't even need these long-range weapons. You can just use, even a pistol will reach the target at this range. And that only makes it more stupid by doing the referendums that now they're fighting in Kherson and Zaporozhye Oblast of Russia. And I think that matters that he divides Russia into two Russias. The real Russia, where you cannot shoot with atoms, and the other one is a kind of Russia, where you can do the warfare. So this is about the perspectives of those people of annexed territories who would want to join Putin's regime. I think their life will not be long and beautiful if they decide to support that. And regarding the supplies of ammo and weapons from our allies, regardless if they annex and do the referendum and get these territories in their mind to become Russia, he is making two escalations. He is mobilizing people and he is also doing the referendum. This is double escalation. One needs to realize that Russia did only in the last 100 years a couple times did mobilize their people during the First World War and during the Second World War. And the West will likely react. Even in his speech, Putin directly stated in his speech that he is fighting with the collective West. So the West, I think, will take notice and probably increase the assortment of what we are getting. And I cannot exclude that they'll probably lift some limits. For example, the limits that we had about using long-range artillery on the Russian territory. This is just the usual negotiation. Two sides are raising stakes, and that's who gets scared first. And looking at Hodge's statements and other statements, they're not really scared. Even Prime Minister of Netherlands said that, don't pay attention to that. We don't care. If Macron called traitors and collaborants, those people who are trying to help Russia on the occupied territories, that doesn't show any lack of resolve with our allies on the West. What do you think maybe secondary sanctions may escalate, the ones that India and Beijing may be afraid? I think it's much easier to reach out and stifle Russian crazy regime by other means. There are, for example, do you know that Russia doesn't produce their own explosives? They make them out of components they purchase. Why don't we stop those streams? And there are many other positions. There are over 500 different streams one can cut and affect Russian warfighting capability. And we are working on that. There is a commission, MacFol-Yermak, that is aggregating this data, and they probably will start working faster, better, more, and will bring us to new heights in this sanction front. I see, just from my point of view, I see at least 100 articles that can be seriously affecting their military-industrial complex, without even calling Russia a state sponsor of terrorism and doing something that will affect India and China. Moreover, they are getting a lot of supplies from different countries, that, including United States, that are of dual use, that you can definitely use in some military equipment. And that means that these have not been looked at yet. So probably it's time to.
Вот смотри, началась Генеральная Ассамблея, на ней выступил президент, я имею в виду ООН. Пропустили они туда
So, United Nations General Assembly started. They let Lavrov to fly in. I think it happened that night, but one way or another, he arrived to New York. He got visas to himself and his group of aides. What does Kiev see in the option of maybe removing Russia from the member of Security Council of United Nations? Because right now this country is already threatening with the use of nuclear weapons, which is going against the United Nations founding documents and principles. I don't know, it's difficult. Perhaps after referendums there may be some action. Right now I think they're giving Russia different signs, and probably without actually publicizing that. They're probably giving a message to Lavrov in person without publishing anything. Do you think it's possible? Yeah, there was a reason for him to be there, right? They at first were not going to let him fly and be present in person, but at the end they changed their mind and they got him in. So that's probably for the informal discussions on these matters, and probably to explain the steps in escalations, what will happen if Russia continues. They do this, we do this. If you do this, we will do this. I don't think Putin will react to these warnings immediately, but obviously they are being forewarned. And I think it will reach into the public sphere and to discussions about Security Council and all, only as a result of regime listening or not listening to these warnings. And Biden actually came with an initiative in his government to expand the group of Security Council countries. So far we had 5 founding members. They may increase that number, so maybe that's part of weakening Russian position there. Let's go to Belarus. Their leader is a bit worried. He made a statement that we are defending our western borders, but we are not going to join that fight. What do you think his perspectives are? Will he be pressured more from Moscow, or that pressure will be weakening now? How will he behave now if there is more escalation happening on the front? I think he'll be weaseling his way out. You think he'll continue being a weasel? Yeah. He will probably do some training exercise together with Putin. He will defer acting on this war. He does not want to join that fight. And given that Americans are treating a perspective of a nuclear strike pretty seriously, he is definitely not interested in becoming part of that joint target for the Western allies. And this is not his cup of tea. In Belarus, he'll probably that all that escalation of war, everything happening in Russia now, that's probably another safety point for Belarus to not participate. And you don't see any possible changes in his position. I understand that he himself doesn't want to, but do you think Moscow can press him hard and basically tell him we tried to tolerate you for long, but it's time to join? Or what? Or what? What lever do you think they can extort on him? Nuclear strike on Belarus? Or no, nothing like that. Maybe removal, maybe physical assassination. No, I think we discussed that in one of the earlier streams. I don't see that changing. Here is another question. Information and political stakes were raised. What about technical stakes? Think about how they will be mobilizing these 300,000 people. Their logistics can maybe handle 60, maybe 90,000 people in their training camps. Okay, they maybe do parts and do 3 days, 4 days. What else? They have other detachments that lost up to 60%, 70% of their cadre. That's the ones that will be staffed with some of the mobilized forces. So their recovery cycle will speed up and they'll stuff these troops with new people and those troops will be probably somewhat effective, especially the ones who manage to keep the core and the commanding core of these detachments. But then there'll be a second wave. Where do they put the second wave? Okay, first we'll replenish the troops that are already fighting. What about the second wave? They don't have resource to make new detachments. The level of brigade, army, corps. They have no commanding officers, they have no equipment. They might throw somebody into Belarus, but it's a very questionable proposition. Throwing them all here with the task to continue capturing of Donetsk and Zaporozhye, maybe. Maybe resist in Kherson longer, maybe. But throw them in Belarus to again try to attack Kiev from the north, that's a very questionable proposition. So you think, what is in your opinion? You think Moscow will stand to defend? Or Moscow will try to expand their appropriations of Ukraine? And they'll try to repeat what they started early in February. I think their realistic task would be to maybe try capture Donetsk and Zaporozhye. Basically, aid in referendum, defend Lugansk, finish capturing Donetsk region, finish capturing Kherson, maybe. I don't think they will go for capturing new territories. I think they just want to keep what they captured initially. What will happen in reality? That's a big question. We'll see how their mobilization goes. We actually had some records when people who were taken from middle of Russia without any preparation were in 3 days on the front. And it was not typical. And it was with volunteers who volunteered to get to the war. So we don't know how people will react, those who are being forced to serve. We know that Russian warehouses are 70% empty. They have no equipment. They have only bits and pieces left. They don't have enough technical means to arm 300,000. Perhaps they can arm about 60. What will happen later? That's a big question. But the situation is so versatile that it's difficult to give a scenario right now of what will happen. I will venture to say that they likely will replenish the beaten up detachments and they bring them back in the fight with the task to finish fight for Donetsk region, to fortify the borders of Kherson, and maybe push some of our troops to more advantageous positions for themselves in Zaporozhye. Maybe that. Maybe advancement in a couple of fronts. Probably a counter-strike on Kharkov direction just to keep our troops engaged. Maybe fortification of their group near Svatova with short punches and pushes at our troops back. Maybe push us on the other bank of Oskol River. But I don't see other perspectives for them because they lack in equipment and arms. And they also lack in the lower commanding level officers. They will probably find retired higher level officers, but it is difficult to find professional commanders for the front lines. We see that on the example of the Third Corps. They lack communications, they don't have enough qualified officers, and then they had big issues. No command, no communication. They failed to properly arm 15,000. How do they plan to arm 60 or 300? So I'm leaning more and more to the version that you voiced, that this is a demonstration and this is an attempt to create additional pressure. Yep, so that Ukraine would go for negotiations, basically sign status quo, we keep what we captured, and you guys, whatever is left of you, go join NATO, we understand we cannot hold you anymore. But transferred to that looks very questionable to me. Also, we don't know how will Russian society look at that. Not immediately tomorrow, but in perspective when the people will start dying. With the closed borders that are being discussed. Oh yeah, they are closing borders. People are fleeing. Have you seen what's happening on the borders, on the border with Finland? People are even driving out to Mongolia on cars. Yeah, I already heard that the amount of people leaving Russia is already exceeding native population of Mongolia. Another question is that neighboring countries are reacting rather hostile to that. They heightening their defense capabilities. And the main part is that the war touched every Russian now, finally. Because until then, there was some contractor, some family somewhere, maybe none got lucky, and they saw some dead people and didn't believe them. They thought it's propaganda. And now it's kind of like here. They got mile-long lines at the border, and they're worrying about their people and their lives. We were worried about our families and our homeland. What are they worrying about? This is idiotic, you know why? Because management structure of Russian Federation failed in leading and working that special military operation. They lacked the resource, they lacked administrative, cadre, financial, equipment resource. And what did they do? When you're failing to achieve certain task, probably a smart task would be to make your task smaller and achieve success at a portion of the initial one. So, for example, they could have taken Lugansk and Donetsk and just kept there. And they would have, if they were smart, they would have just withdrawn to that. But what did these people do? After having failed with a mathematical task for a third grader, they decided to solve something for a 10th grader. So they're making it much more difficult for their management to do things they can do. They need to run the referendum, they need to mobilize and provide logistics and training and do that. So after failing with a simpler task, they're pushing them to try to work out a more difficult task. That's what they're doing. And this is, an iffy story. Okay, we've been live for almost 34 minutes, almost 500,000 watching us. and
лайков нам поставили.
140,000
Пожалуйста, ссылки на этот эфир.
click the like
Размещайте в своих
button.
аккаунтах в социальных
Again,
сетях,
please
группах.
share links to that stream on
Особенно
your
тем, кто
social
нас
media,
смотрит из России,
especially the ones watching
может,
us from Russia.
в
Find
мессенджере,
it
хоть еще каким-то образом передавайте.
either in
Особенно тем,
Messenger or
кто
somewhere. Give it
потенциально может
to
оказаться объектом
potential
мобилизации. Для них
objects
будет
of
интересно
mobilization. It may
послушать.
be interesting for them.
Ну и обязательно подписывайтесь на канал Feygin Live.
And of course,
И,
subscribe to Feigin Live and to
пожалуйста, на канал
Olexiy
Алексея Арестовича. Я уже
Arestovich. And if you are
говорил
watching,
о том,
listening to that
что
in English,
можно
subscribe to
игнорировать
the
очень
privateer
подробно наши
station.
эфиры, особенно
I
те
did say that
интересные,
people can
которые мы должны
ignore
бы
our
представлять. И
streams
сейчас это
for a
время
long
пришло.
time,
Действительно,
especially the ones
попали туда,
who
куда
should be
надо, поскольку
interested
это раньше можно
in
было
what we are
измерить,
talking
кто там
about, because they
горит
could be
в
ignoring that
украинских танках, кто это там
whatever is burning,
обугленные
whoever is
трупы,
dying in
разумеется, это
Ukraine,
все
those charred
выдумки
bodies on the
украинской
streets and
пропаганды.
fields
А
of
нет,
Ukraine,
теперь
that's all
это
Ukraine
будет
propaganda, right?
вызывать живейший интерес.
Not
И наши
anymore.
эфиры
Now
будут
that will be
смотреть как раз,
causing
прежде всего,
very
россияне,
lively
поскольку
interest in
оттуда они
Russia,
могут единственные почерпнуть достоверную
because
информацию.
we're one of
Если
the few sources that
слушать
actually give them the
Шойгу и
real data
Коношенкова с
of what's happening.
погибшими
Otherwise,
почти
their
600
other option is to listening to
известных
Shoigu and
помещичек
Konashenko,
из
who
Страсбургской
still
столицы.
say
И
6,000 dead
что значит
instead of
на
at
уши
least
про
10 times more.
то, что значит война, это, кстати,
And
еще один мотив, почему они занижают цифру. Да там не
listen
опасно,
to
не
their
бойтесь,
lies.
всего-то 6
That's
погибших.
another reason why they're
Повесите, хоть
saying
вас 300 возьмут, ну почему
it's
тебе
it's
бояться?
not so dangerous
Это
there.
еще
It's
для этого.
only
Да нет,
6,000 dead.
ребята, нет.
Out
Это
out
как
of
раз
300 of
Украина
you,
вполне себе
there'll be
останется
maybe 6,
там
7,000 who'll
на
perish. So your
украинской
chance to
земле,
stay alive
как
is
для
very
десятков,
high.
десятков тысяч
No,
людей.
guys, the
И
chance
вот
for you
сейчас о
to stay in
протестах.
Ukraine forever
Последнюю часть
is
эфира мы посвятим.
super high.
Завтра же у нас будет день, да,
So
в четверг? Или как?
now let's dedicate the last part of
Да.
our stream to the
Но в любом
protests.
случае, вот сейчас очень
Tomorrow
важный
we do have a
вопрос.
stream, right?
Сейчас мы
Yes.
прошлой видеозаписи
So
на
today
протесте,
is a
который
very
сейчас уже проходит в
important
Москве и Петербурге. Да, это
aspect.
сотни
This is a
тысяч.
video
Не
of a
150
protest
тысяч, но
happening
это
in
сотни
Moscow and
тысяч,
St.
точно не
Petersburg.
тысячи.
It's not thousands yet,
Вот
it's
сейчас мы посмотрим
hundreds,
видеозапись, чтобы
although
понять,
they
что
do
за
have
какое-то
some
нападение.
stats that
Я
they
не знаю, этой информации не проверено.
arrested
Если это
already
действительно так,
hundreds.
то
There's a
вполне
video with
себе
one
это можно
girl.
считать
Somebody
началом
posted that she died. I don't
того,
think
что
so,
могло
but
бы
this
перерасти
is
в нечто большее.
basically
Если уже
something that could
девушки,
grow into
которые не будут
something,
призывать
into a
гибнуть,
bigger protest. If
пусть даже
the girls
случайно,
who will
чего
not
они бы
even
все не
be
хотели, то и прием какой-то будет
conscribed to the
принесен,
army or mobilized to the
еще
army,
что. Вот посмотрите на экран, это сейчас последнее видео,
are
которое
falling on the
выходит прямо
streets.
с улиц
I don't know,
Москвы.
maybe that was a
Девушки
result
уже
of some rough
двигаются, они
handling.
могут, ну, не
Maybe they
двигаются.
did something, punched or
Какой еще у
whatever
нас там запись?
to her. Here,
Сейчас
okay, here
найду.
finally the video comes through. Let's
Вот эта
see what's going
видеозапись.
on. There she is.
Понесли ее в здание Альфа-банка.
So she was carried into the building of Alpha Bank.
Мне так кажется,
It's somewhere near the subway Kurskaya or Arbat. Haven't been home for a while, and it's not enough visuals to geolocate where it was. I'm sure we'll hear that in the news. Now we have a unique chance to address those people who are still alive and who may turn into corpses rather soon, and send a message to them here. I think it's a good time, because what would be the other reason for us calling for such a large audience without turning to them? So, what would you want to tell them? The situation is very clear. It is either one senile old man in Kremlin or thousands, tens of thousands of your lives. And on that video, maybe there was a first civil victim of the protest. The chance to survive in this war is very minimal, because even qualified detachments and troops perished here. 40-60% of them perished here. You, with your 2-week training, your chances of survival will be minuscule. Also, HIMARS and 155mm guided missile, guided shell doesn't care about your rank, doesn't care about your experience and your skill. Up to 85% of losses on this war are caused by artillery. You won't even see it coming. you will incur curses of local population. And with very high probability, you'll be facing a very gloryless death. At least 75% of Russian troops remain here in Ukraine, decaying in forests on the roads. Your command is not picking them up. This is what your future may look like. And Russian command doesn't care about picking them. Probably, first of all, because they don't need to pay any to the families if they don't. There is no body, there is no death. So you probably have several options to avoid that. Maneuver to avoid being drafted. If they got you, try to pretend that you're not medically worthy. And if they already gathered you somewhere for training, try to do collective resistance. Why collective? Because it's harder to do anything with groups of people. You can find different options. Right now you have 10 years in prison for avoiding draft, but if there is a group of you resisting that, they'll need to start negotiating. And ideally, of course, do the revolution. And don't forget, it varies similar to what Strugatsky had in the book about their towers. Of course, yeah, you are alone in the city, but there are many people like you in your cities. Just think, of course, police is beating you up. But compare beaten up by police with being destroyed by Ukraine military. Especially if they already gathered you and gave you weapons to go into the war, what can they do to stop you if you decide to not go? For example, there you are in a training field, you decided to stay there and not go anywhere. What can they do? They can attack you with their jets, I don't know, turn artillery onto you. There'll likely be revolts in the neighbor training camps as well. And do not forget that any detachment that will revolt will likely be supported by huge groups of opposition, by everybody abroad in Ukraine, in the West. You'll be an example to the other world. An example of resistance to a crazy old man in power. And police, by the way, is also afraid. They're afraid that they'll be sent to Ukraine, so I don't think they'll be risking their lives to try to suppress you too much. So it's really a question of who starts. Whoever decides to start, that's whom the Russia will back. I understand it's scary for the initial ones, but second, third, fourth, it'll be much easier. Revolting detachments, revolting battalions, that'll be a serious deterrent for that regime. You will definitely not be sent to war if you do that. It's very simple logic. If you revolt on the territory of Russia, this is your guarantee that you will not be sent to Ukraine, because there is no real reason. A, it's difficult logistically. B, they're risking that you'll just switch sides. If everything failed and you found yourself in Ukraine, we are in a modern world with cell phones, and there are locals, and many of you, at least every 10th of you has a relative in Ukraine, use local population to give signals to Ukraine side. I'm telling you, we have everything ready to welcome those who decide to leave the occupation forces and switch side. We have systems, we have logistics to welcome you and to help you transfer. And some of you may decide to keep arms and go join Freedom of Russia Legion and fight against Putin's regime. You're welcome to do that. You'll be heroes, you'll be the ones who did not murder and stopped regime from murdering. We had cases like that. We took up to 100 people at a time. We have different ways of doing that, and we continue doing this along the front. We are also fine-tuning our system for accepting large numbers of troops, figuring out logistics, how to do that, giving you a path And those 5 people who will probably be in your battalion and screaming at you, do not surrender, you know what to do with them. There are 5 of them and there is hundreds of you. And then you're welcome to come join us. Plus, you have a choice. If you want to fight, you can go fight at the Freedom of Russia Legion. If you don't want to fight, you can just go to join prisoners of war and text and chat with your families. It's much better than sitting and waiting out there in the field till HIMARS hits your head. So, of course, it's best option not to get to Ukraine, but if you ended up here, find a way to cross the border, to cross the front, find a way to not fight, because fighting with your back, with Kadyrov detachments behind your back who are eager to shoot you is much worse than just shoot them and come join us. All right, I can just sum it up. This is an appeal to what may happen. For now, there is still a chance to stop it by civil activity on the street, on the streets of your cities. Each of you can go out to the administration of your cities, regions, oblasts. This can be done not just by those who are at risk for mobilization, but also by their families, mothers, sisters, daughters, fathers. And I will say to support Mark, the only thing they're afraid is numbers. When you're coming out in 10 or 50, of course, it's easy to round you up. When it's 1,000, 5,000, that's a big questionable situation. When it's 50,000, that's the end of regime. In a smaller town, they'll have nothing to do with you. And that's probably an easier step to topple that regime. Just mass coming out on the streets and protesting. That will stop it at the core, and they'll understand they're done. Because there is a iron law, you cannot give orders that will not be executed. You can give orders to police to round everybody up, but if there are thousands more than they can handle, the system will break. And this is your earliest chance to call that situation before you will be sent to trainings, before you'll be sent to war, before you'll face the might of Ukraine army and allied weapons on your heads. And this is another principle. You do not send revolting people to war. They cannot mobilize the ones who are revolting. You cannot mobilize 300,000 if all of them were out in the street revolting against mobilization. What an idiot can give them any weapon. After that, they already said they're against you, they do not share your views on this war, and they want to have peace, and now you give them weapons to do what? So just mass protests is your salvation. Very basic step to salvation. Follow basic logic of life. You don't even need to topple Putin. That's not the task for you, but at least you can guarantee they will not conscribe you. 300,000 men who went to the streets and said, no, we're not going to fight. That's it. And then there are other Italian ways to do that, subtle ways to not work for people in the industry. Just think about that. Remember a regime of Lukashenko that was almost toppled when workers of the factories decided to not work, when they decided to protest and join people in the streets. There were already people in Russia who are burning your military collection points. There are people who are derailing rails, derailing trains, bringing military stuff to the war. And there are many other people in the chain. Just do your protest. Just sabotage the steps of this conscription. And that should be enough to break that back of that mobilization, and you don't die here in Ukraine. You don't need that, guys. Russian people does not need that. This is not joke anymore. This is not some TV war when you can switch a channel and then watch a light comedy after in the evening. Think about your chances of outsmarting and outplaying the coalition of 54 Western countries with military arsenals and equipment. I'm addressing that to those people who are being mobilized now, who realize that it's their father, grandson, nephew are being sent to die. So your mass protest will be the simplest way to break that mobilization. This is the easiest way to demonstrate your civil disobedience and stop that from happening. You do not arm the protesters. So that's another option, right? Indeed. Tomorrow, 7 p.m., we hope, despite the difference in time zones, 7 p.m. near the administration of your cities and regions. We understand it will be different times for different time zones. Come to your administrations. You'll figure it out there. You'll see what needs to be done. But tomorrow at 7 p.m. after work, or between that, get there. Of course, those who will be touched by that mobilization, but also their families. I think you will see how effective is that. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Protesters do not get arms, do not get weapons. They're not being sent to fight. Just remember that. Very simple logic. All right, we had almost 520,000 people watching us live. Over 180,000 clicked the like button. If you forgot to subscribe, please subscribe to both of our channels tomorrow at 10 p.m. and subscribe to the Privateer station if you are listening and watching that in English. We'll see how it unfolds. Goodbye, everybody.